All right, Nick, thank you very much for joining us today. Good morning. So, how are you today?
I'm great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing amazing. I mean, first and foremost, it's really amazing to have you here. I've been looking forward to it for weeks now, and finally we have you here.
I'm happy to
This is
be here. Thanks for
amazing.
the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So I've got some major questions for you with regards to criminal law, and I'd like to ask you a couple of questions to know and get your perspective on how you work things for yourself, right?
Sure.
So my first question to you here is what inspired you personally to what inspired your career in criminal defense?
Well, I always kind of wanted to be an attorney, and that came originally from my teachers, just kind of probably being sick of me arguing with them and telling me, "Oh, you're going to be a good lawyer someday," and it just kind of sank in over time, I think. And then the more I got into it, I did mock trial a lot. I did mock trial in high school for 3 years. When I went to college, I found out there was a collegiate version of mock trial, and I went to
Oh.
Sacred Heart University and played Division I football there, but they didn't have a mock trial program, so I started it.
Hmm.
And we went to two uh, regional tournaments, one at Yale and one at St. John's,
Hmm.
and that's kind of where I really started developing a passion for trial work, and litigation.
Wow.
And when I graduated, I got into a local firm in my hometown, probably the biggest at the time, and explained that to them. But 2.5 years in, I had one hearing and one trial. So it wasn't happening enough. And then, I left and went out on my own, and we've scaled now a firm of our own. Um, and the scaling part really happened when I realized that trials just don't happen enough,
Hmm.
but the criminal side of things, I've always kind of been a person that feels strongly about people's rights.
Hmm.
And I've told employees this, and I've told people this in other interviews. I really truly am a person that would gladly give 9 criminals a second chance before I'd put one innocent person in jail.
Right.
And for me, people say, well, how can you defend somebody if they're guilty or if they've told you they did something? To
Hmm.
me, whether or not they did something is irrelevant to the criminal justice process.
Hmm.
The process is set up in such a way that it's not whether or not you did it, it's whether or not the people can prove that you did it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Hmm.
And that's the gatekeeping function. Because if we don't have that, we're not far ahead of the Spanish Inquisition. If someone can just be accused of something and then was burned at the stake, but now would be just thrown in jail without due process, that's a big issue.
Of
So
course.
I listen. If they did it, that's on them. It's on the prosecutor to do their job, and my job is
Mhm.
simply to make sure they do theirs.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. Actually, it would have been one of those questions I would ask you eventually, but yeah, you completely nailed it. And like why you um get to uh defend someone or represent someone who maybe allegedly did something, or maybe even they did it or so. Like how you get to actually how you how do I put it, like your own personal conviction, and you go, okay, cool, you know what, yeah, I'm going to defend this person regardless. That was going to be
Because
one of my
that's the
questions.
thing. No matter what they're accused of doing or have done or what have you,
Hmm.
they're a human being and they're a citizen of the United States. They're no less entitled to the protections of their state constitutions or the US Constitution than anybody else. Just because they may have done something that is illegal or frowned upon or what have you, doesn't mean that they don't get the protections the same as everyone else.
Mm, exactly. Okay. So now, I mean, just piggybacking off of the question I initially asked you. So now, what are some of the unique challenges that you would face in this kind of field compared to other areas of law?
Yeah, you can be hamstrung sometimes because of it, right? So in a civil litigation, for the most part, you have people that want to testify to certain things, to certain observations, usually pretty straightforward, right? There's some issue. But with us, if our client admits certain things to us, we may then be completely prohibited from having them take the stand,
Mm,
which sometimes is okay. It doesn't hurt you, right? Other times it does. But it's just the same as I give, the instructions to the jury during jury selection. We have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Hmm.
And the judge instructs them, you can't take any type of adverse inference from that. And but people always do, right? Because you'll say, listen, if he's innocent, what does he have to hide?
Right.
But I tell like the jury, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because on one hand, you're going to say, well, this guy's charged with a crime.
Right.
He'll
It's a
say
two-edged
anything.
sword.
He'll say
Hmm.
anything to get himself off,
Right.
right? So he's damned if he does.
Hmm.
If he doesn't, they're going to go, well, what's he got to hide? Why doesn't he say something? So you're damned if you don't.
Right.
And so you have to explain to people like that's a big factor in what we do that may not be in other aspects, right? If you're suing because you broke your leg,
Hmm.
it's not very nerve wracking for you to go testify about what happened. I was
Hmm.
driving my car. This guy ran through a red light, crushed my leg. I had to have surgery. It still could be nerve wracking public speaking, but you're
Mm,
not being questioned. You're not being accused of something,
of course.
right? These people have to determine, even if they're as innocent as can be and completely wrongfully accused, that's a very nerve wracking situation. You now have to be cross examined by the person accusing you of doing something illegal.
Hmm.
And some people are just not good public speakers. And it's very risky for them to get up there and stutter and stammer and not understand questions and look confused or appear that they're being disingenuous,
Mm,
things like that. And so it's very risky. Even if someone is innocent, it's very risky to put them on the stand just because you don't know how someone's nerves are going to have them reacting in the moment in front of a jury and a judge right there on the spot.
all right, amazing. I absolutely love that answer. That is amazing. So now, can you share like a particular memorable case that you had where you successfully defended a client against some, like an insurmountable odd, basically?
One of my favorite stories that I've recently told is 2018. We took on a murder,
Hmm.
and it was a 4-year-old murder case. They found the murder weapon in a dumpster about 45 miles away, and it was a World War II pistol that they
Wow.
claimed that my client used, who has no experience with firearms,
Mm.
and struck the victim who was over 100 yards away.
Okay, that's some marksmanship.
Right, right, right. And I have my pistol permit, and I've trained pistol handling and shooting and things.
Mhm.
That's impossible. You got a better chance of winning the lottery twice,
Mhm.
right? And so we were defending this case, and the prosecutor really didn't even have explanations for certain things.
Mm.
The victim was 120 yards away from my client, supposedly went down on one knee to fire back. But somehow the prosecutor failed to address the fact that the autopsy report had the bullet entering just above the ear, but traveling back to front,
Mm.
which is
Okay.
physically impossible. And so once we held that close to the chest for a while, and then we started bringing out, like the week before trial, some of the fact, like physics disputes your theory of what happened. They can't physically have happened in that way. Look at the autopsy report. Look at the metal rod showing the trajectory of the bullet. That's not possible to have occurred.
Mhm.
They ended up, and our client had admitted being in possession of a weapon. So ultimately, we got the murder dismissed, and he pled to 7 years on a gun charge. And the cool part about it is last year, he got out, and his father and he came and gave me a hug. And they both thanked me, said, "You saved my life." Like,
Wow.
they've turned over a new leaf. He's got a job. He's working 40, 50 hours a week.
Mhm.
And he admitted it. He said, I was in possession of a gun. So, of course, so I'll take that. But before that, the only offers we had were 23 to life.
Wow, that's crazy. And then you shrunk it down to seven, you said.
Yep. And so he went in 18. He had about a year in by the time we finished the case. So he did, 5-ish. So like I said, he was out last summer, and he and his dad came, and that was a very rewarding experience for them to come back and thank me.
Wow. That is amazing. Job well done from me too. All right. So now in the realm of criminal defense, right? So how do you balance your duty to like how do you balance your duty to advocate for your client with ethical consideration and the broader implication? Uh like just looking at how people would react in the society to things like that. Like how do you balance that? How do you
So
manage to do it?
yeah, I mean, the way that we have to balance it is against the evidence. You
Mm,
know, every case is different. We might have three petty larcenies. They're all going to have different circumstances, right? Somebody might legitimately have been, trying to steal something. I've seen them where you're at self checkout and you forget to scan the case of water onto your cart at
right.
Walmart, and somebody trying to tackle you before you get out the door.
Right.
There's honest mistakes that happen.
Hmm.
Guess what? You and I aren't have never been trained how to properly use self checkout machines.
Right.
It's it's not unreasonable to believe that there would be errors.
Hmm.
It's not
Of
really
course.
any different than using any other electronic. If you don't really know how to use it, there's room for error.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Doesn't mean, but petty larceny is an intent specific crime. You had to have intended to deprive that store from that product
Hmm.
indefinitely. That's the issue,
Hmm.
with some of these self checkouts because it's beeping. Maybe a couple of things don't beep, but I'm yelling at my kids so I don't hear that they don't beep,
Right.
and they think I'm doing it deliberately or something. So it becomes tricky. So those are some more routine cases that we see, but there's differences in everything, and you have to
Mm,
understand that. While we can try and take a uh, consistent application of our workflows of how we address cases, we
hmm.
have to be understanding that each case is going to ebb and flow a little differently,
Of
just
course.
based on what's involved. Not only the person, if they've got a record that changes things, that changes the DA's position on things, it can change the court's position on things.
Mhm.
Depending on their record, it can change the mandated outcome. Right? If you're a second felony offender in New York, near state prison is mandatory if you're convicted of a second felony within 10 years. So there's
Mm,
only so much we can do there. Don't get me wrong. We and have gotten people out of second felony offender statuses by getting creative and working with the DA.
mhm.
But the key is, I think, for somebody who's looking to get a criminal defense attorney, it is very important to get somebody with experience, right? Because not just like everything else, not all house builders are created equal, right? Some build crap houses, some build beautiful, strong houses.
Mhm.
All attorneys are not created equal.
Right.
Just because they have an ESQ after their name does not mean like don't hire me for bankruptcy. I'll tell you right now, I'll screw it up before I even
Mm,
start. I'll screw it up,
right.
right? And people just think because you're a lawyer, you can do all of this stuff, right? You learned all of this stuff in law school. Like, no, they train you how to think like a lawyer in law school. They don't teach you how to even run a law firm,
Mm,
right? So just be very conscious of that because I tell people all the time, look, shop around. I don't ever try and, beat people over the head, hire me on the first call. We'd love it if they
right.
feel comfortable enough to do that.
Mhm.
But we tell people, shop around, go for it. We're confident in our knowledge and experience that you won't find that elsewhere.
Mm,
And while, yes, this guy will do it for half of our price, you're getting a different form of representation,
of course.
right? And the analogy I've used occasionally, which seems to resonate with people, is look, not all vehicles are created equal. You can certainly go buy a Ford or you can go buy a Ferrari,
Mm,
but you certainly cannot get into that Ford and be disappointed that it's not performing like the Ferrari. And thus they have
absolutely.
very different price tags,
Mhm.
but you're paying for the performance of the lawyer or law firm you're hiring.
Mm. Right. That is a great point right there. Performance and the quality and the luxury you get from the different um and even people, the same thing applies to people as well. So okay, now with that in mind now, so like with regards to criminal defense, right? So I mean, I'm sure over the years there's been like improvement in technology and the way you do investigations, the way you get evidence and things like that, right? So
Absolutely.
currently, right? So with currently with the advancement of technology and forensic science, right? Like how has it changed criminal defense like in recent times, especially with the emerging technology and
Oh, a lot,
you know
a lot. I mean,
mm,
you know, 10 years ago, you could get away with a lot more. right? Honestly, we had a murder trial in April of 22,
Mm.
and it was the amount of evidence and surveillance was just utterly overwhelming. The
Wow.
poll cams that the city has followed these guys turn by turn, picking everybody up, dropping everybody off, stopping out front of the barbershop where they dropped the killer off, who ran
Mhm.
inside, who ran back. Everything was on video. I mean, it didn't help that they had one of the guys in the car had an electronic monitor on his ankle that they tracked
Mm.
turn by turn too.
Oh no.
But guess what? They didn't have that 15 years ago,
Mm.
right? So they would have never had that evidence to present against my client.
Right.
You know, but similarly, phone calls now, text messages, they're spoofing apps.
Mhm.
You know, there's the cell phone dumping technology because of the advancements in cell phones and how much more data
Mhm.
is contained within them. They are, for like a prosecutor, that's like a honeypot of information.
Mm.
I've had cell phone dumps, one cell phone dump, 15,000 pages,
Wow.
you know, and this is where technology advancements are helping for the efficiencies.
Mhm.
Because back in the day, I would have got 3 reams of paper to go through that report, right? And I'd have to
Mm.
highlight it, my cross-eyed by the end of it, and need new
Right.
glasses. I mean, we just finished a case. There were over 1,100 hours of video and audio surveillance.
Mm.
I had to get 10 2 terabyte hard drives in there full for this case, right?
Wow.
Like back in the day, what would I have had to do? Like go sit at the
Uh-huh.
police station to listen to these recordings because there wouldn't have been a way to get them digital to hand to me,
Mhm.
or they would have given me a room full of cassette tapes, right? Because
Right.
they would have transferred it to a cassette tape, and I would have to sit here like with a Walkman for half the year listening to these controlled phone calls, or like it would have been
Right.
nuts, right?
Mm.
But now we're seeing even further advancements.
Mhm.
We can pull now. We have software that we can pull, say, police reports if we've got voluminous police reports, and it'll summarize them.
Mm. Oh.
For our personal injury side, we can upload 5, 6, 700 pages of medical reports. They'll do medical chronological summaries of each place our client was seen, how many times, and then a summary of those visits and what was done or reported on or addressed. Um, so the advancements are making it for me. Like we have a case management software now.
Mhm.
We've got maybe 500 open files firm wide.
Mhm.
I can go anywhere in the world and I have access to them all on my phone and every file and document within every matter.
Wow, that's technology for you. Technology right there. Which then ultimately makes all the everything else faster. Like the way you work cases is gonna be faster. Getting things wrapped up in court trial and everything is much faster now with
It
all
can
the
be,
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
The courts still grind at their own pace, depending on their calendar volume, right? Like we see
Mm.
some counties, things move faster
Mhm.
because they have a lower volume,
Mm.
which, it's to some extent is good, to some extent is bad.
Mm.
Sometimes it benefits us if the case grinds more slowly, gives us time to develop more things. Sometimes we can
Right.
have our clients perform more equitable um, services. They can complete courses. They can do little certificate programs to show that they're learning from whatever. If it's a DWI, we can have them do the Mothers Against Drunk Driving victim
Mm.
impact panel online beforehand, get the
Right.
certificate. Do some of these things, go get an alcohol evaluation so that it can be ahead of time. We have it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
um, Things like that um, help, because then we're building equities, we're showing. But if the case is moving really, really fast, we might get to a point where they're like, okay, here's your offer, take it or leave it. And we haven't had time to get our client to perform those equities. So there's times, and again, it's on a case by case basis. There's cases that we want to move quick, quick, quick.
Right.
There's cases that we're like, nope, let's slow down. But
Right.
sometimes the judges don't like that. That case with 1,100 hours of audio and video, the
Mhm.
judge is like, okay, great, you're going to have your motions filed in 40 days, right? I'm like, Judge, there's not 1,100 hours between now and the time you want me to file these motions. how can I file complete motions if I haven't even gone through the entirety of the discovery package?
Mm.
You know, we have one in, north of here, 24 counts of attempted felony murder of an officer. The judge is like, we got to move this case. I'm like, Judge, we have 24 counts of a very serious and significant allegation.
Mm.
This is not something we can like comb over and be like, oh, yeah, yeah, we're ready for a plea or for a hearing.
Right.
We've got 24 victim statements to read through. We've got 24 body cam videos of these officers that we need to go through every second of so that we don't miss anything.
Mm.
And that for that reason, there's in New York State, family law, they have standards and goals, right? The
Hmm.
judiciary has, the Office of Court Administration has promulgated standards and goals. So you have standards
Right.
and goals for timelines that cases should take. And
Mm.
on more than one occasion, the attorneys here in my office have had to remind criminal court judges, like, Judge, there's no standards and goals here, and it's for a reason. Some cases, sure, can move quick.
Right.
Others, what am I going to do? Just not sleep for 6 months and listen to all this stuff? Because that's what it's going to take.
Right.
There's only how many hours in a year, right? If you're working full time Monday through Friday, nine
Hmm.
to five, without taking, any days off, that's 2,080 hours in a year. They wanted me to
Yeah.
get through 1,100 hours of audio and video in 40 days. It's not actually possible,
Not possible. No.
right? Like, unless you got a time machine, I'm running out of time.
Wow, that's crazy. So now, I mean, this is not necessarily part of the questions I had for you here, but now, do you like what would you say are like the pros and cons to like the rapid development of like technology and how it could how it does impact um criminal defense right now, evidence and things like that?
Oh, it's great. I mean, like I said, we used to have to go get banker boxes of stuff. If it's a grand larceny embezzlement case, we would get banker boxes of stuff and have to comb through it. And did you miss something? Did they forget one page? Whatever. Now everything's digital. They send us a link. We open the link. We download everything onto our system. We check
Mhm.
it every week or two to see if they've uploaded anything new.
Right.
Like I said, with the phone dumps, getting everything digitally. The videos. Back in the day, they had to put things on VHS.
Whoa.
Right? Imagine, of that 1,100 hours, some were controlled phone calls, others were surveillance video. Imagine I had to watch even 500 hours of VHS tapes,
Yeah.
right? So it streamlines things. I can download them. I have them on my phone. I'm flying. I can kill 5 hours of discovery prep on the flight.
Hmm.
So it makes things a lot more convenient in that I don't have to lug 500 pounds of paper around,
Right.
right, to review things. And the collaborative nature of the software and technology is important.
Hmm.
Inter-office, we have a couple of satellite offices, but all of our employees are in one building. But
Hmm.
we can still work remotely if someone's ill or they're on, away. We can also talk within the matter. We can put notes to each other within the case so
Hmm.
that it's very specific. So it's definitely streamlined a lot of efficiencies operationally from the firm standpoint. From the client standpoint, it's probably a detriment if you're committing crimes because, like, everybody has a camera in their pocket, you know?
Hmm.
10 years ago, pretty similar, not as much advances in the technology of those cell phones and such. 20 years
Right.
ago, forget it, man. Like, I remember graduating law school, I didn't have an iPhone. I got an iPhone after I got out of law school. It was my first iPhone I ever had. That was 2010.
Yeah, because I don't think cell phones we really had like cell phones like that till
And even then,
maybe around
the
yeah.
cameras sucked. They might not have even had video at that point, right? The first
Hmm.
iPhone came out in '07. What did we have before that? We had
Like
bricks with
GSM,
buttons.
Nokia. Yeah.
But what were you doing if someone was assaulting you? You weren't taking a picture of them or a video of them. What happened if you saw somebody being assaulted or being purse snapped on the sidewalk? You couldn't pull out your phone and start recording it. You could maybe try and call 911, but it took a while for them to figure that out with cell phone carriers and such. So now it's like anything you do is going to be captured and
Right.
recorded in some way. So it's like it's tough. It can be tough. It can, because a lot of times there can be very direct, damaging evidence
Hmm.
because of the advances of technology.
Mm. All
And I
right.
guess I would say it makes the system more efficient, though,
Of
right?
course.
Because now we're making sure the system's working.
Hmm.
Technology is allowing the prosecutors to have better evidence.
Got it. All right. Cool. So now my last question for you here is on the importance of empathy and understanding when representing a client, right? Who may or may not have committed a serious crime, right? So now, in that regard, like, how do you navigate the moral and emotional complexities, right, that comes with defending an individual who is accused of a wrongdoing?
You have to enter every case with an open mind,
Hmm.
because no matter what your first impression is of the person or the allegation, there is just about always a different or additional explanation or factors involved that you had never considered.
Interesting.
Okay. Or simply the fact that, yeah, this person might have done something, but what's the collateral consequence? Do they have young kids that are now not going to see their father for 20 years if I mess this up?
Hmm.
And what impact is that going to have on those kids? Right. So we have to take a global, more empathetic approach, because yeah, you might think that my client is a scumbag and he deserves everything he gets. But what
Mm.
about the collateral consequences? Right? What about the the mom he's leaving behind with three kids? What about those three kids? What about that person's mother that maybe he was the caretaker of and he was doing what he did to cover the medical expenses so that she didn't die?
Right.
Right? And you have to understand those because sometimes they're relevant. Not always, not always, but something like that, like if that was the fact of the matter, why say my drug dealing client was dealing in the first place because his mother has cancer and he didn't have insurance or she didn't have insurance and he was doing this to pay for the chemo treatment.
Mm.
I want to know that, because that puts my client in a completely different light. And if there's facts that establish that to be true, I want the jury to know that too, because I want them to see him in a different light.
Of
I
course.
want them to see the reasons why he was doing this illegal, nefarious conduct. It's still not justified. It's not necessarily accepting, that would be allowed in these circumstances. But at least they can say, "Look, I don't agree with what he did, but I get it. Given the situation, I would probably do the same thing." Right? You want to,
Mhm.
and some of that's considered jury nullification, which is you're
Mhm.
trying to get them to empathize more and ignore the law. But those are things you have to factor in, because just because someone's guilty of committing a crime does not mean that they're a criminal. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean they did it for nefarious reasons or for selfish,
Right.
egotistical
Or even for
reasons.
malice, right?
It may
Mhm.
be they were backed into a corner and felt they had no other choice and needed to make ends meet, or more so, ends meet to make sure someone didn't die. Right? I mean, that's an extreme example,
Mhm.
but everyone's life and situation is different. You can't assume they're doing this just because they want to do this and they're choosing no other, options. Sometimes people don't have other options.
Mm.
And again, I'm not justifying what they may or may not have done, but I think it's like you're saying, it's extremely relevant,
Mhm.
especially for the attorney to know that, because if I'm going to properly represent them, I need to be passionate about my defense as well.
Right. Of course. Yeah, because you have to be able to see both ends of the spectrum. Why did they do it? And yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with that. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it when it comes to the questions today. And thank you very much, Nick, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And then for the audience, please give them where can they find you, your website or your email, whatever information you can give the audience to actually.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're Passalacqua and Associates in Central New York, Syracuse, Utica area. Our website, cnytriallaw.com. And as I tell people, we represent people who've been charged with a crime or have been seriously injured that don't deserve to have their life ruined as a result.
Mm. Amazing. All right, there you go. So go ahead, find them. As you can see in the interview, he's demonstrated a lot of passion. As you can see, every word coming from his mouth is passion, straight up passion. So you see, you have the right attorney to represent you. So that's pretty much it, Nick. Thank you very much. And once again, I'm Shei from S Group, and I will see you on the next one, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing.